Thanks for being in the room with me. I'm Brian Sussman. More on me at briansussman.com. And while you're there, please order my new book, Climate Cult: Exposing and Defeating Their War on Life, Liberty, and Property. I have a great guest coming up in just a moment. He is my adopted congressman. He's from Arizona. He's a former combat Navy SEAL sniper. His name is Eli Crane. He's running for a second term. Shouldn't be a problem for Congressman Crane. He certainly has a lot of things to say about a Kamala Harris as commander-in-chief. He's also got a lot to say about a Kamala Harris as the border czar. And let's not forget Timmy Walz. He has a lot to say about Tim Walz and stolen valor, so stay tuned for that. The DNC, Kamala spoke last night. You know, isn't it interesting? These people are so crafty, so they're liars. I was trying to think of a creative word, but no, they're just liars. Look how they're able to so easily spin things for their people who question nothing. I mean, this is a woman who didn't even go through the traditional primary process. There was no Iowa caucus for her. The party of democracy sort of threw that out the window when it came time to pick her. But beyond that, isn't it interesting how they've taken her cackle? And I've been watching this woman for a long time. During my 20 years of service as a talk show host in San Francisco, I watched her from DA all the way to AG to senator. I watched the whole transition. The cackle has always been there. But now the cackle is a sign of her joy. Did you notice during the convention they had a couple who was talking about their child who had been captured by Hamas and remains a prisoner of Hamas? All the while, outside the DNC convention, there are these huge, ugly, horrid anti-Israel, anti-Jewish protests going on. But inside, they finally had someone there who was speaking out against the practices of Hamas because their child has been taken hostage and they haven't seen nor heard from that child for over 300 days. But did you notice this? Well, on the one hand, you think, well, that was nice of the DNC to have somebody up there talking against Hamas. Those people never uttered the word Israel once. Israel was never mentioned once during that entire convention. So you got the cackle turning into joy, Israel never mentioned, and then Tim Walz. Oh, he's the everyday guy from Minnesota, don't you know? You know what the DNC now is doing? They started handing out on Friday caps, ball caps, that were camouflage with Kamala on the front. In other words, this is their effort to embrace and engage and draw in all of the people that they dismiss and laugh at and besmirch. The rednecks, the country bumpkins, the gun owners. They really think that by offering free camo hats with the word camel across the front, that they're going to draw those people in. I pray to God, look, for anyone who loves life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, for anyone who's for the Second Amendment, for anyone who's a Christian, wake them up. This is a party who is not for your Second Amendment right. This is a party who is for the right, the quote-unquote right, to abortion at all costs through 9 months. But I digress, as I often do. Before I get to my interview with Congressman Crane, I'm going to bring something up to him because this irritates me more than anything else about Kamala. And you'll not just hear this once, but you're probably going to hear it twice when I get into my interview with him. When I was in San Francisco doing my radio program, this is 2008, I remember receiving a phone call from a woman who was panic stricken, crying her eyes out. And my producer whispered in my ear and said, "We have Mrs. Bologna on the line." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, really? It's her?" "Yes, it's her." I'm trying to calm her down. My producer, Eric, Boy from the Hood Made Good, the pride of Daly City, said in my ear. And we got her on the air. Through her tears, and at times there was even something akin to screaming going on with her. I mean, she was beside herself. She was recounting the story that had just made the news a few days earlier. Her husband, Tony, and two of her kids, Matthew and Michael, had been gunned down at virtually point blank range by an MS-13 gangbanger in the United States illegally from El Salvador. There was a third child in the vehicle. That third child survived and was able to identify the killer, Edwin Ramos. Kamala Harris was district attorney at the time. Edwin Ramos had been arrested at least a couple of times prior to this shooting. And each time he had been let go after a slap on the wrist, let go, back out into society. He was not deported. He was in the country illegally from El Salvador. He was not deported because San Francisco was and is a sanctuary city. Kamala Harris was the DA. And Mrs. Bologna was on my radio program crying, screaming, recounting the story of her husband and two boys getting killed and her son witnessing the whole thing. And she was enraged because it had been determined by Kamala Harris that they were not going to pursue, the city of San Francisco was not going to pursue the death sentence. Kamala Harris to the San Francisco Chronicle said, "Well, we take these situations on a case-by-case basis." She wouldn't say she was, well, everyone knew she was against the death penalty. But as the DA, she said, I look at these case by case, and this didn't meet her criteria for the death sentence. And that's why Mrs. Bologna was calling the program, because she had just heard that there was not going to be a death sentence for this ruthless killer. That's Kamala Harris. Mrs. Bologna and her son have been in the witness protection program ever since because they fear retribution by another MS-13 gang member. And God forbid the way the state of California works these days, I wouldn't be surprised if this guy's released from prison someday. And if he's released from prison in California, I got news for you. Basically, every county is a sanctuary county. He'll stay. Unless we can get new leadership in the White House to make sure people like that are busto out of this country. So that's my story. That's why I don't like this woman, Kamala Harris. I'll never forget that conversation with Mrs. Bologna. It almost haunting. I want to switch gears right now, and I want to bring in a gentleman that I respect so much. We've had a chance to actually spend some time together, and he joins us right now. Please welcome Congressman Eli Crane. Congressman, it is great to see you. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Brian. Thanks for having me on again.
You know, it's just amazing. You've been in some incredible battles throughout the course of your lifetime as a Navy SEAL, and the battle that you are in right now for this nation is just incredible. Who would have ever thought, and I'm serious about this, Congressman, who would have ever thought we have essentially a socialist running on the Democrat ticket for the White House?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think going back a decade or two, either of us or probably any of your listeners thought that would be a reality. But I'll be honest, once Bernie Sanders, who is a socialist, ran and arguably, won on the Democratic side, provided that things were on the up and up. I figured it would come to this, and this is the direction I've seen that party go for a long time, and so it doesn't make it any less scary. But at the same time, I think many of us have seen it coming, which is why some folks like myself who never wanted to be in politics,
Hmm.
decided that we had to throw our hat into the ring.
She would be commander in chief if she were president of the United States. I just have to ask you your thoughts on that.
It's probably even a little bit more terrifying than Joe Biden. It's pretty obvious that she has a socialist bent to her, and that is terrifying because that never ends well, and it's one of the most well documented, recorded political experiments in the history of the world, and it ends up in the same place every single time, and that's persecution. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, corruption, and it never ends up well for the people.
You understand bad guys, having been in the military and in very dangerous situations. I'm just curious what the world's bad guys would think of a Kamala Harris as president.
There's an old saying that many of us like to fall back on and talk about, and that's peace through strength. Well, what is the opposite of that, Brian? I think we're seeing the opposite of it right now. I think we're seeing chaos through weakness, incompetence. You can play with that word salad as much as you want, but we're seeing the exact opposite of peace through strength right now. And I think whether it's Vladimir Putin, President Xi, Kim Jong Un of North Korea, or the Ayatollahs in Iran, I think they're licking their lips and just hoping that Donald Trump does not come back to power, because they most certainly respect him. I wouldn't be surprised to an extent if they fear him a little bit. And at the very least, Brian, they know that if he says something, he probably means it, unlike Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I just don't think that those bad guys who are tough guys in their own right, I don't think they have any respect for someone who speaks out of both sides of their mouth like a Kamala or a Joe does.
I struggle with especially Kamala Harris's competence.
Mhm.
I know she didn't get into that spot because of a merit-based system. I think everybody knows that. I think that's why she doesn't hold press conferences. She doesn't have the ability to hold press conferences. And quite frankly, Brian, the people that are handling her and running this campaign know that the only chance they have is to keep her away from answering questions and talking.
Let's talk about Tim Walz. I would love to get your take on his record. I've studied it extensively. I believe the fact that he left the military early when he was in charge of a whole lot of guys who were about to be deployed to Iraq. I mean, I've never served in the military, sir, but I will tell you, just as an observer, to me, that doesn't sit right. You have all of these guys that you're in charge of, they're getting ready to deploy, and you decide you're going to leave the military. Is my thinking askew here? Talk to me about this.
No, I don't think your thinking is askew here. I think, unfortunately for me, I'm so used to dishonest, lying politicians that I think that Tim Walz will fit right in that role. He's been a congressman, he's been a governor, and now he's running for on the ticket for vice president. When I look at some of the comments that I've seen him make in other interviews, talking about getting rid of weapons of war, the same ones that he carried on the battlefield. That's obviously alarming on two counts. One, it's very anti-constitutional. It's very anti, individual freedom and liberty for citizens, and removing their ability to protect themselves, their families, their communities, etc. But it's also alarming because he's lying about going to combat, which we know he never did. And so, and as you know, Brian, that's one of the many lies that he's told about his military career. And so, for those of us veterans out there, even if you're not a veteran, if you look at that, analyze it, and think, well, if he's willing to lie about his military career, what else is what's he not willing to lie about? That's the question that you inherently get to. And then obviously, Brian, going back to something I was talking about earlier with Kamala Harris and my concerns with her coziness with socialism. There are recorded conversations with Tim Walz and some of his supporters, saying that one man's socialism is another man's neighborliness, right? And obviously that is so not even true, but it just goes to show how cozy this entire ticket is with totalitarian top-down federal government control, which is what the exact opposite of what our founders wanted. And it's the exact opposite of what will be good for the American people. And I mean, if you want anything screwed up, Brian, give it to the federal government. And that's why many of us try and keep the government out of your lives as much as possible, because anything they do will cost, three times what it should cost. It won't be run efficiently whatsoever. And most of the time, the people put in charge, are political appointees. It's not because of their merit. It's because they did a favor for some, high-ranking person, and now they're getting, paid back. And so it's all sorts of screwed up, and it's very scary when I look at this ticket.
You presented me with a commemorative congressional coin when I was with you a month or so ago, and I cherish it. It was just a wonderful thing you did, giving me this coin. It meant something to me. I have been able to see the congressional coin that Tim Walz used to hand out when he was in Congress. Have you seen this, sir?
I've seen photographs of it, Brian. I've never seen it in person, but I have seen photographs.
I'm going to do a screen share here.
Yep.
That was not his rank when he retired.
No, it wasn't. And it's one more massive issue with Mr. Walz, and it makes you question, who vetted him. I don't even think the Democrats care anymore. After I saw them run Joe Biden, a guy who had lost multiple presidential races, had to drop out of one for getting busted for plagiarism, a guy that, even Obama himself said never underestimate Joe Biden's ability to F things up. I'm sorry, but I can't detach myself from the fact that I don't believe we have transparent, fair, and honest elections anymore. I just don't. And I know a lot of American people don't believe that either. They know that, devices, technology are hackable. They know that, 2/3 of the European Union won't even allow mail-in, voting, because it's the easiest way to inject fraud. And I gotta say it, and I know it frustrates a lot of people and brings on the election denier smears and arrows. But I'm just gonna say it. I think it's one of the reasons why they're not as concerned about the makeup of the candidates that they're running.
Well, I've been watching Kamala Harris I watched her for 20 years while I was on the radio in San Francisco. And I remember when she was the DA, and I remember a terrible story involving the murder of a dad named Tony Bologna and his two sons, Matthew and Michael. They were gunned down in cold blood by an MS-13 gangbanger from El Salvador who was in this country illegally. Edwin Ramos was his name. The youngest son survived and was able to identify Ramos. Ramos had been arrested multiple times in San Francisco and never deported by Kamala Harris, never sent over to ICE. He got away to end up killing another family. They were begging for capital punishment. And Kamala Harris said, nope, we're not going there. We're not going to do this. I take things on a case-by-case basis, she said. And this isn't a capital punishment case. A dad and two kids. That mom and the surviving son are in the witness protection program to this day. That's Kamala Harris. That's her on the border. That's her on crime. There's no way this woman should be commander in chief.
No, absolutely, Brian. And you just brought up, you brought up a specific case that Kamala Harris definitely had responsibility in, but then you brought up, I think, an even bigger picture of her being the border czar, Joe Biden appointing her the border czar, even though the media now is trying to memory hole, that entire fact and, story that all of us are very familiar with. And I mean, you look at what a disaster that southern border's been. I know we've talked about it many times on your show, but this is the type of leadership that you are going to see if this woman, wins the election in November.
We're recording this, of course, Thursday afternoon. So tomorrow, Friday, you're going to be at a very significant rally with Donald Trump in Phoenix and just a star-studded cast of great patriots. Talk to us about your excitement regarding that opportunity.
I'm always excited, Brian, anytime I get a chance to support the former president and hopefully the next president of the United States. I'm also excited to be there with, some of my friends, Carrie Lake, Andy Biggs, and others. And I think it's going to be like a lot of the Trump rallies I've been to. I think it's going to be in some places standing room only. People are going to be, the lines are going to be out the door for hundreds and hundreds of yards with a lot of people not even being able to get in. I think it's going to be electric. And I'm excited to be there because I love this America First, populist movement, that's all about representing the people. And I think that's why you see, the president of the United States, the former president, being able to fill up stadiums, whereas the other side has to pay actors in many cases, and hold, events at much smaller venues. And so I'm excited to be there. I actually get to speak tomorrow. This will be my first opportunity to speak at a Trump rally. And so, I'm hoping that the Lord gives me some wisdom and, just blesses the words that come out of my mouth so that, we can rally together and, put this country back on the right track, at least for the next 4 years.
Right on. Well, I'm so excited for you. I'm so thrilled that you're running for a second term. I have every confidence that you're going to win, and we need you in Congress now more than ever, sir. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you.
And I certainly appreciate Congressman Crane taking the time to spend with all of us here on the Brian Sussman Show. God bless you, my friends. Let us continue to pray for this nation. And let us pray, seriously, let us pray that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz do not win this election. In the meantime, do everything you can to be a change agent. Do everything you can to spread the word. Do everything you can to make sure that your Christian friend especially does not vote for the other team. They're voting for evil, plain and simple. Let's make America great again. God bless you, my friends. Thanks for listening. Please share, like, and if you haven't already, subscribe or follow. Thanks. All right. Thanks, Congressman. I really appreciate this time as well. And thanks to your guys for giving us this opportunity.
Yeah, I'm glad they were able to help me figure out the phone situation.
Well, what I think is hilarious is you could take apart and put together and then load an AR in your sleep. I mean, it is pretty funny. I mean, you could.
I know, man. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not even going to make excuses. I'm just a Neanderthal when it comes to technology.
That's so great. All right. God bless you, brother. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay. We'll see you. Thanks.